Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to day two of QRM Summit 2021. I'm Ejaz Hussain. I'm honored to give the keynote address for today. Compliance in the age of lockdowns and disruptions, reconciling different perspectives, future business continuity, regulatory agility, and oversight. Over the past 35 years, it has been my privilege to be a member of the global community of pharmaceutical knowledge in different capacities in academia, at USFDA, at several corporations in US, Europe, Switzerland, and India, and as an advisor and consultant. My focus today is on human development and professional development. And the title of the presentation had so many different words. We are makers of our meaning. And I thought it would be useful to put those words in context. Future is what I'm looking forward to until the year 2030. Business is work-related activities that we do as professionals, individually, as teams, as divisions, as a corporation. Continuity is in the context of being a professional and striving to continually improving as a good practitioner. Regulatory, although the word we associate with formal regulatory authorities, I wish to broaden that word to means we all are regulators as professionals. Oversight is essential to ensure we don't make mistakes. Warp speed is the buzzword that we all are familiar with now, and real-time review, inspection, and real-time controls, as in the context of the process analytical technology, which I had the privilege to lead at USFDA, I think is the broader sense of real-time in my mind. Measurement is the key. Measurement, validity of our measurements is the basis of our learning. It is the basis of converting what is subjective to us to objective as a professional, and obviously measurement uncertainty in the context of analytical method development and in process controls, and is fundamental to what we do in quality control and quality assurance. Maturity is the word I think we have been discussing for some time now, and I want to build on that, giving a dimension of professional development is my intention today. Rolling reviews, virtual reality, virtual inspections are some of the tactical considerations we are engaged in with respect to regulatory submissions and fulfilling our regulatory obligations as well as responsibilities. Maturity is having fully developed powers of body and mind. It applies to a person, and I think we extend that notion of maturity to societies. We also extend the notion to technology. We live, work in a socio-technical system, and maturity of the social and the technology aspects are both equally important. How does it relate to development as a professional, as a human, and as product development? I think provides us a basis, a common ground to think about maturity in the context of assurance of quality in the quantity of products we produce. We can discuss future business continuity, regulatory oversight, and agility in the context of warp speed to real-time controls, measuring and regulating maturity, rolling reviews, and virtual reality of inspections. To, to provide a focus, the context of my discussion is harmonizing emergency response, and I'm using three recent announcements from FDA on accelerating adoption of advanced manufacturing technology, specifically in the context of Industry 4.0, and the launch of a pilot program on assessing quality management maturity for finished dosage forms and for APIs. And perhaps not many may be familiar with a memorandum of agreement that FDA signed with the National Institute for Standards and Technology. And that is a announcement that takes me back to the very beginning of the launch of the PAT initiative. That's almost more than 20 years ago, the discussions within FDA on the need to think about collaboration with NIST. Some parts of FDA are very well advanced in the collaboration with NIST, such as biologics and devices. The small molecule world, I think, is now an opportunity to reach out in that direction. And I think I'll explain why that becomes important. The efforts ongoing within the International Council of Harmonization are also important directional vectors from our perspective. ICH Q12, product lifecycle management; Q13, continuous manufacturing; 14, I think, is an interesting reminder of going back and revising Q2, particularly to be in line with real-time measurements and controls, and hopefully, I think, overcome the challenges of somewhat constrained guidelines that came out as real-time release testing and aspects of validating vibration spectroscopic methods in a conventional analytical or compendial mindset. Collaboration with NIST is an important vector in my mind. Measurement, research, and manufacturing focused programs at NIST have provided a foundation that helps the nation's manufacturers to invent, innovate, create new products and services more rapidly and more efficiently than their competitors around the world is the general claim of and the objective of NIST. And its approach to measurement system uncertainty and Malcolm Baldrige Excellence Award are the two aspects, I think, which particularly the small molecule world would benefit tremendously. And we have been talking about culture of quality and the need to recognize corporations that excel in maturing their quality management system and excel in the culture of quality and not lump them in the same bucket as all others. The Malcolm Baldrige Award and measurement system uncertainty management, the way the approach that NIST brings forward, particularly in the context of digitization, I think is a significant opportunity for the pharmaceutical sector to think about. I wish to recommend to you to take a moment or two after the QRM summit to get to know the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award and the criteria and the framework of this award, which, among other things, first and foremost emphasizes a systems perspective, visionary leadership, and customer, patient, student focused excellence, among other value-based approaches to assessing maturity of a organization, maturity of systems, as well as, in part, the culture of quality which is built in there. There are several ways of thinking about maturity of technology. I think I'm advisor to Applied Materials and Smart Factory program that they have, and this is one um, model for digital plant maturity, which is adapted from other literature sources. And here we are describing 5 stages of maturity, going from put foundation in place, enterprise connected systems, data standardization, cross-platform analytics, move from reactive to predictive, optimization, knowledge management to end-to-end automation, maximum return on investment, and efficiency. And in a sense, that level brings us to predictive performance and to prescribe effective actions, to be essentially self-authored within the plant to prescribe a way forward. I think is what comes about. So, and the maturity of a factory occurs in many dimensions: analytics, control, predictive maintenance, operation, productivity, knowledge advisors, and so forth. I think so. We are familiar with the maturity models in the context of technology. How What is the maturity model for professional development is the question in my mind. The 21st Century Cures Act, which was enacted in the US in 2016, brings forward the notion of patient-centric development, real-world evidence, personalized medicine, continuous manufacturing, as well as professional development in a subtle way. And being patient-centric development, moving towards value-based pricing for the new drugs, and the challenges that we encounter in healthcare practice before the COVID pandemic, I think, is something to pause and think about. As at FDA, when we were starting to launch the PAT initiative, in parallel, the Institute of Medicine in US launched their program to reduce medical errors. They came out with a landmark publication, To Err is Human, in 1999, and they published several such papers. I'm just bringing forward 3 of those here just to point out. And then in 2010, the Institute of Medicine came out with a conclusion that the continuing education program for physicians in America has, in their words, quote unquote, utterly failed. And they essentially proposed to move towards continual professional development as a paradigm shift in continuing education for physicians in the US. And more recently, in 2018, a combined workshop of Institute of Medicine, National Academy of Science, and National Academy of Engineering put forward a paper which called for a integrated design and systems thinking for well-being within education and practice. And if we are aware of the challenges of medical errors, and before the COVID, and for example, the Johns Hopkins study has essentially repeatedly demonstrated that medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the US. And when you look at what are the reasons for non-compliance with standardization, SOPs, and so forth, this is not very different from what the challenges we face. So the point I want to make with this slide is simply this. Within a society, physicians, through their extensive education, residency, fellowship, and licensing procedures, are among the most educated individuals in a society. And when they are struggling with essentially compliance with practices, with procedures, and to mature their systems, we have to put that is a pause to think about what about us as professionals in pharmaceutical manufacturing, where although we recognize, say, for example, 21 CFR 211.25, education, training, or experience, we have not really defined objectively what are those criteria for matching the right education, training, and experience with the level of complexity of job that we have to do at different levels, the hierarchical levels in an organization. That's left up to individual corporations to manage. But given that, if I take a US perspective and put my regulatory hat, I have to manage oversight of, say, 3,000 facilities that are part of the global supply chain, which then collectively define the quality and the assurance we can deliver to patients in America. What is the level of education, training, and experience across the global supply chain is a uncertain factor that we often do not account adequately. Yes, we are talking about now culture of quality and quality management system maturity as indirect ways of addressing that gap. So why not address that gap more directly is where my thoughts are. Amidst and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, a tipping point for all of us. In my case, it is a tipping point and turning point to step back, um, to really think about the challenges we face broadly in case of my own family, um, losing my mom to this challenge. Um, one aspect was very, very clear to us. Nobody should die alone, and what do we do to achieve that has been a focus of myself and my wife, who is a physician at Johns Hopkins in Maryland. And the personal message here really is power without wisdom is a recipe for disaster. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm changing myself. Carey's research, knowledge is power, but the wisdom is in practice. The challenges we face are so complex that we must take a systems of systems approach. In the context of advanced manufacturing and advanced manufacturing and production, the World Economic Forum has provided a way to think about a systems of systems approach. And their transformative map, I think, which is interactive, I find it a very useful tool. And from that perspective, sustainable production as a competitive advantage, navigating global value chain disruptions, especially in the context of raw materials, raw material supply, and extending that to the supply of our talent, and fears of data sharing, mitigating workforce disruptions, and ensuring a supportive, inclusive technology adoption, I think, are important considerations which may not necessarily fall immediately within the QRM and QMS context. But as leaders, we have to take a system of systems perspective here is an important consideration. When you think of the the contemporary model of new drug development and approval for marketing authorization, there is an intrinsic inherent level of maturity required to cross those hurdles of getting marketing authorization. In this context, maturity is a cause, and the performance of the system, the effect and performance we only measure today in negative vocabulary of product recalls, warning letters, import alerts, etc., that are essentially mistakes of that occur within a system. And in that context, I think nothing is perfect, but continual learning and improving is an expected measure of system performance. And insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I think in that context, the notion of the Great Reset is talked about quite extensively now, and that invokes um, different emotions in different people. Looking forward as an opportunity, perhaps as fear of being left behind and not being part of the Great Reset, are some things that we have to be aware of, as well as account for in how we go about in our tactical and strategic progress towards maturing our quality systems and Industry 4.0 efforts. The life cycle of a pharmaceutical product is multi-generational. Many professionals come and go, developing, manufacturing, and managing the quality of a pharmaceutical product. And errors of omission are the ones which are the most difficult to resolve. And they accumulate, they accumulate. So the question in my mind is, do accumulating errors of omission in our legacy systems and our products on the market now make Great Reset the preferred or only option, given that we consciously wish to mature our quality management systems and to usher in continual improvement, and that is to go beyond the traditional corrective and preventive actions that we keep repeating again and again. Why focus on errors of omission, and how to ensure a common cause strategy then become a way to think about the next steps we take. Our regulatory system is a reactive system, and it evolved faster than pharmaceutical science and technology. And the words FDA approved and validated sets our mind. So the reason we need to focus on errors of omission is because we do not, these are our blind spots. And in 2019, when we met for QRM Summit to 2019, my focus was on uncertainty and satisfaction and expectation management as additional consideration to risk and knowledge management. And my interest was to share thoughts on errors of omission and errors of commission and why we need to focus on errors of omission. And these slides are available to you in case you wanted to go back and look at that. I placed this in the context of generics in a fog of war, and the journey forward was chaos to continual improvement, which also was my contribution to the CPHI 2019 report. Today, I wish to place errors of omission and commission and blind spots in the context of how should we think about quality management maturity. My former colleague, Doug from FDA, made the presentation at PDA on 15th of September 2020, introducing the pilot program on quality management maturity. The steps in his mind, he's a physician, where CGMP, ICH-Q10 leads to QMM. And yesterday also, I got a sense that many of us are also thinking as those are the steps. My request here is to take a moment to think about, from a human development and professional development perspective, what is the cause and what is an effect? And let's not confuse cause and effect. I propose to you that an effective quality management system, although we have a model in ICH Q10, but that doesn't mean that before Q10 there was no quality management system. We had one, but we didn't have a common vocabulary to describe it. ICH Q10 provides a common framework for us to start thinking about what is a quality management system in the context of a business management system, in the context of a regulatory management system. I posit to you is a maturing quality management system uh, provides assurance of adherence to current good manufacturing practice regulations. That means compliance with self-authored standard operating procedures, which are for under the quality policy and so forth. So the steps in my mind are maturing the management system, because managers and leaders are more mature in an organization than the people they supervise. And therefore, maturing management system is maturing leadership, maturing management, individual and professional management, which guarantees an effective compliance with the quality policies, corporate quality policies, and standard operating procedures, which are in adherence to current good manufacturing practice regulations. And that subtle change, I think, is an important way to make sure that our starting conditions in our efforts to improve are the right ones, because in a chaotic system, the starting conditions, the system is extremely sensitive to starting conditions. So thinking about socio-technical system and its maturity, we put it in context of the Constitution, a national constitution, law and order, institutions, professions, maturity of society and its technology. And we can think about ways of describing stages of maturity. Here, simply put, capricious, manageable to predictable. One can adopt more formal ways of thinking about that from models of technology maturity, for example. But the point I want to make here is socio-technical systems are hybrid systems. In part, they're chaotic. In part, they're complex. In part, they're complicated. And in part, they're simple. A system separates order from disorder, but it can be chaotic, it can be complex, and it can be complicated and simple. And we traverse these systems without much thought, because these are seamless systems in our practices. And to improve these continually, I think we need to make sure that improvement can happen within a system without necessary permission from outside the system. And for that, we need to have simple systems for which we have best practices. In complicated systems, we have good practices. And there's a subtle distinction between good and best practices. And the distinction is the applicability of that practice and the needed education, training, and experience to appreciate the complication. For example, multivariate aspects of quality as opposed to univariate aspects of quality in a simple system. And, and manageable in that sense, for management, we don't necessarily have SOPs. We work under a policy, guidelines, and practices emerge from that. And in a chaotic system exhibits extreme sensitivity to starting conditions. And the starting conditions in most socio-technical systems obviously come down to the values and principles we adhere to or we believe in, which are the strange attractors. In the context of cause and effect relationships and our efforts and expertise needed to to decipher, understand, and justify those cause and effect relationships so that we know what is critical and we can predict the behavior of a system. So in order to control it, we have to consider simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic systems, which are inherent characteristics of a socio-technical system. And errors of omission should but didn't, errors of commission shouldn't but did, I think are important nuances that one needs to bring into our vocabulary and our considerations as we think about breaking the recurring corrective and preventive actions to have preventive actions which are system-wide so that we don't repeat our mistakes. And once we have our ability to predict and control a system in the, say, for example, in the context of stable and capable processes in a statistical process control criteria, then only the journey of continuous improvement can begin. The necessary stage of human slash professional development one needs to achieve within a particular system for it to continually improve is what is termed as being self-authored. In Professor Keegan's constructive development theory of adult human development occurs in stages, which he calls orders of consciousness. Stage 1 is impulse control. Stage 2 is the imperialist mindset. Stage 3 is being socialized. Stage 4 being self-authored. And stage 5 being self-transforming. Being socialized is being good in a society. Being self-authored is being internally validated, not seeing external validation, not responding to external audits, not waiting for FDA inspections. And self-transforming is being able to see systems of systems. So based on my experience, particularly when I returned from Switzerland, from working in the tobacco sector, working on tobacco plant-based vaccines and modified risk tobacco products in Philip Morris in Switzerland, it gave me a break and it exposed me to behavioral aspects which I often discounted as a scientist, as a pharmaceutical scientist. But the behavioral economics and the behavioral aspects and the human development aspect then became a very keen interest of mine. And so when I returned from Switzerland, I was actually planning to retire at that stage. But then I got invited into working in India and just thoroughly enjoyed reconnecting with India in 2012. But the challenge there that I saw was, I think, an amazing talent, technical talent, but maturity in the context of being self-authored was lacking. And so therefore I dedicated much of my last 5-6 years in helping to build that maturity in Indian education and corporate systems, especially being self-authored is where I come from. But I want to put that experience in a broader context of the PAT initiative and the QMS ICH-Q10. Now, I'm using two phrases. One that I heard from Norm Winskill and Steve Hammond at the FDA Science Board meeting on 16th of November 2001, when they came to FDA Science Board to say that they do not adopt PAT because of fear of regulatory delays and fear of regulatory questions, which will just delay their approval process and so forth. So they use the phrase, don't use or don't tell. And Martin Van Stiesel, as the chief quality officer, He exemplified the application of Q10 in his number of publications, presentations at PDA, ISP, and so forth. And the phrase that Amgen had used in 2004 as a starting point was, if I don't look, there is no problem. And that was in the context of effectiveness of CAPA, corrective action, preventive actions. And the investigations were not science-based. And so in that sense, I think the journey of Amgen to the 3.4 defects per million opportunity, which FDA recognized, I think became a reason for me to look as an outside in look, as I don't have any association with Amgen. So this is an independent outside in look. So when I translate this in the context of adult human development and apply that to organization or a quality management system using Professor Keegan's work, you see that we tend to be socialized. We wait for FDA guidance. We wait for FDA inspection to do something. And a small group of leaders at Amgen in 2004 took upon themselves to say, no, this won't, we are here to serve patients, and stuff happens and investigations have to be scientific. And so they took the organization to be effective in investigations, to be scientific in their investigation, to solve problems locally. And they took a preventive mindset. And that those characteristics match up quite well with the stages of adult human development, which Professor Keegan talks about. And he also talks about immunity to change. And the immunity to change is to overcome the change prevention system and the feeling system. And change prevention system is in part the regulatory system, the post-approval change challenges, the type 1, type 2 variation, and so forth. And the feeling system is the comfort in FDA approved and validated label. And so I don't have to look. If I don't look, there's no problem. And I think this is an important aspect of human development and professional development that we need to think about. A mature quality management system does not repeat their errors. Recurring errors become mistakes, and mistakes become external quality failures. Repeating mistakes are a sure sign of an immature quality management system. But breaking the 2 to 3 sigma barrier is fundamental and beyond the comprehension of many in the sector. How can we be evidence-based when we only develop to be 95% confidence interval? We use alpha of 0.05. How does one get to 6 sigma? There's a different metric. Here we are repeating and we are counting the number of mistakes. So there's a different way of thinking about that. But the point I want to make here is we need a common cause strategy. The Amgen journey to 3.4 defect per million opportunity took almost a decade. We don't have a decade to do this. We have to accelerate that process, and we need a common cause strategy. And the common cause strategy in one aspect is our measurement system uncertainty. Going away from the compendial mindset, compendial testing into compliance mindset, to real-time control mindset. And I think for that, the importance of FDA's collaboration with NIST is so very important. Remember, in the legacy system, the compendial mindset came before FDA did. And the compendial monographs, especially with respect to our raw materials and with respect to functionality of our raw materials, with respect to the physical attributes, the validity of those measurements in terms of their repeatability and reproducibility leaves a lot to be desired. And compendial monographs are market standards intended for when tested, you have to conform to those. But if you adopt those for QC testing, routine QT testing with the built-in type 1, type 2 errors in there, being right first time is almost literally impossible. especially when it comes to solid dosage forms, where the raw material variability and certificate of analysis does not necessarily account for the functionality and processability of those materials, and our physical attribute measurements such as dissolution and others are prone to inherent errors, where reproducibility and repeatability and our reference standards have a lot to be desired. And so the NIST shift towards NIST standards, which are more commercially based and not just market standard, I think is a major step, a major directional vector. But that directional vector will take us in the right direction only if all of us engage and participate in that process. Be the change you wish to see in the world is not just a slogan or a metaphor. I think that is the reality, that we have to be the change in the world. And a fractal quality management system, which is in practice, for example, at Johns Hopkins here, really is ensuring self-authorship at each job, at each hierarchical level in our organization, and that is achieving the spirit and intent of, say, 21 CFR 211.25, educate the right education, training, and experience for the level of complexity of the challenge one needs to handle, I think is a key. Elephant in the Dark was the original story, not Six Blind Men and the Elephant. And I think being in over our heads is the challenge that we have to overcome. And we must remember, a bad system beats a good person every time, from Deming. And therefore, agility, oversight, and continuity demands care is research, knowledge is power, and wisdom is in practice. So professional development in 21st century, what is it, or what it should be? From my perspective, it is to consciously go beyond traditional education and training, to be self-authored in what we know and how we know it. Epistemology is critically important. To be self-transforming and filling gaps between what we know and what we can implement. Feel the need, experience the need, know the way, to leverage our collective experiential learning and understand the multiple context of our abstract nouns, quality, assurance, and consciousness. One way to do so is by increasing our order of consciousness. Profiteer who learns to be patient becomes a professional, who with practice becomes a good practitioner. So maturity of a system leads to good practices. Good practices are the outcome. Maturity is the input.